Ahoy hoy gang, if this is your first time with us, welcome, and if you're joining us from a previous video, hey, we love to see it and I hope you're doing well. It's Season 6! Where Season 5 was more experimental than the seasons before it, it almost feels like it was necessary for us to have Season 6. Which, yeah, that's how numbers work. But anyway, Season 6 is honestly one of the strongest seasons of the series, and there's a lot of really great reasons why. We'll get a lot of Dale, Bobby, a Nakatomi Plaza freebaser makes an appearance, and we even get two-parters in a season! So, what works? What fails? If your friend wanted to drive a tank, would you join or bail? It's time to tell Season 5 to hit the bricks, because we're reviewing Season 6! This is one of the few times I'll actually be able to talk about this, but I want you to imagine you're in America right after one of the most catastrophic events of modern history. You're reeling from a truly devastating event, but the world cannot stop spinning. You try and find some semblance of normal in an otherwise chaotic world. People go back to their lives anxious and stressed. They try to find humor where they can get it, some openly mocking The Amazing Race for its premise after it had just premiered. Imagine you see commercials for the new season of King of the Hill. It's exactly 1 month after no one knew what to say, and you turn to the one place that felt comfortable, that felt like home. No matter what, this series would always be a guiding light that helped you refocus. And then Bobby just starts cranking his foot back and drilling guys in the nuts again and again and again. Let's say it together, gang. That's my purse. I don't know you. You know the episode, whether from the memes or just being one of the most familiar, beloved episodes of the series. Like, this is what America needed in its time of healing. Just Bobby cranking back and smashing nuts. The absolute absurdity is what makes it such an iconic episode. But let's take it from the top. Bobby hops over to save Connie's sleepover by stripping for the girls, which, like, wow, what a start to an episode. Then Chain Wasana-san comes over and bullies Bobby and makes him eat dirt. Not a good look for the Bobster. Then he goes to the Y, doesn't get to take boxing, instead takes a women's self-defense class because he doesn't want to feel powerless anymore. He was tired of feeling powerless in the face of danger. And when Chain comes up to humiliate Bobby again, his reign of vigilante nut-busting justice begins. Bobby protects the meek and smashes Sack until his dad gets called in to teach him better. Hank decides to box his son, starts to push him around a little, and when he won't stop, Bobby goes for his danglers. You pick on Bobby and you get the thunder. I mean, he puts Hank down. One doesn't even drop again. Man's got no ass and one nut. It's tragic. Khan actually convinces him that he should rule the roost since he put his dad down, and Bobby starts throwing his weight around until Peggy comes out, and when he tries to self-defense her, she tackles him to the ground and teaches him some manners. Bobby goes on a smash nut spree until he gets stopped by his mom. That's the whole episode. That's the whole thing. It's like a kaiju movie where they're just moving the nut kicker to a new place to fight. There's nothing deeper to it. Hank has to call Peggy to fight for him, and she has to actually fight her son, who just went blind with nut-based fury. Obviously, the episode was made well before its air date, but it's incredible to look at the media that was released in that time period that gave a nation hope. Sure, Spider-Man is another probably much more significant example, but I don't know. I think there's a non-zero amount of people that found solace in one of the most absurd in the best way episodes of King of the Hill. Just to put it in perspective here, this episode aired and 11 million Americans watched it live. 11 million. At no point in Rick and Morty's history has it ever broken 3 million viewers for an episode premiere. And that show was influential enough to bring back sweet and sour sauce. We cannot discredit the impact media has, especially in times of crisis, and I genuinely think this is a perfect example of that. Where there is just nothing else but Bobby just going nuts. You don't need me to tell you this is a 10 out of 10 episode. It's more like one of the best of the entire show. Like, this episode was nominated for an Emmy for Outstanding Animated Program. This is what the core of animation looks like right here. It gives you a laugh and shows you that everything is gonna be okay. This is what makes King of the Hill shine. It's a glorious, glorious Dale episode. 2 top episodes just back to back, I gotta tell ya. It's almost like they're trying to make you forget about something, but I have no idea what. Dale is up for re-election at the gun club and is handing out macaroons and regaling the other members with his very obviously fake exploits as a soldier of fortune. His claims are challenged by Mad Dog, played by, and I'm just so happy this is true, Gary frickin' Busey. I love this episode. I gotta tell you that right here, right now, it's a good'un. Dale accidentally discharges and gets laughed out of the gun club and spirals feeling like a complete and utter failure. This episode is incredibly important for Dale because not only does it establish the gun club more, it also establishes Dale as the de facto leader. He has some amount of authority to these guys and that means a lot to him. He actually fights for re-election and willingly tries to impress them. He has a community away from the gang, and when that's stripped from him, he feels hopeless. So Hank and the gang try and hire him through his ad, and he is just the most incompetent bounty hunter ever. We get pocket sand, and that's right. That's my purse, directly followed by pocket sand. It's the meme season, everyone! Anyway, the guys get captured at the gun club by Mad Dog, and Dale has to go and save them using the flower delivery trick he talked about in his dictator story, and yeah, sure enough, he's re-elected president, takes charge of his group yet again. But I just want to take one moment and highlight a character in the episode who has about 5 lines. Earl, the black gay member of the gun club. At no point is he bullied or mocked for it. At no point is it used against him. He is just Earl, the gun club member who loves the man who's at home making his dinner. It's a nice touch. It didn't need to be there, but because it is, it elevates the episode as a whole. It's pushing back on stereotypes about middle America where people just really want to survive and live as best they can. They really don't care about that kind of stuff, and as we've even seen recently, support for LGBT is at an all-time high. Dale's community, no matter what their sexuality, race, creed, what have you, just really loves guns, and there's nothing wrong with that at all when you're careful with them. And the whole reason Dale got laughed out was because he wasn't careful with his firearm, which is also a great touch. Soldier of Misfortune is a perfect bullseye of a 10 out of 10 that gives Dale time to be both the dumbest man in the room and President Eternal. I encourage anyone to fight me on this opinion. You are welcome to bring whatever proof or evidence you need. This is the worst episode this season and one of the worst of the entire show. It is offensively bad. I am sure someone somewhere likes this because it fits their flow of comedy, but it is just not for me. Peggy is asked to fill in for Spanish Club and they'll reschedule their Mexico trip when the teacher is available again. Peggy insists that she's perfectly equipped to take the kids down to Mexico because her Spanish is great. Some positives of the episode. Outstanding cast! We have special guest stars like the late legend Fred Willard playing Herr Geiger, Academy, Emmy, and Tony Award winner Kathy Bates playing Officer Cooper, and Carlos Alzoraki playing a Mexican cop, though you'd probably recognize him from Reno 911 or as Rocco in Rocco's Modern Life, or like the 4,000 other voices he's done through his career. Man is crazy prolific. It's just a shame that all these legends are attached to this episode, though Fred Willard would return later on. Hank has a cop flirt with him and he tries to be as Hank as possible about it. Peggy, while in Mexico, not only tries to use Bobby to guide the class into loving her, but showcases she has absolutely no idea how to speak actual Spanish and ends up taking a young girl from her family on the bus back to America, even when she tries to slow down and tell Peggy in no uncertain way that she lives in Mexico. Hank even packed a Spanish-English dictionary for Bobby that Peggy throws away because she was just that confident things would be okay. Okay, even if we just leave it at that, she took a child illegally across the border and kept her in her house. That's not a good look. She also endangered an entire bus full of kids, and when she brought the girl back, thought that the people were worshiping her when they were justifiably arresting her. The whole episode is Peggy is an overconfident idiot. That's it. That's the whole thing. She never understood Spanish, and she leaves the episode blissfully unaware that everyone is mocking her behind her back for what she did. And honestly, for what crime she committed, I think that bliss needs to be taken away. She needs to see the harsh reality. She needs to understand that everyone was mocking her. It's only fair. This is not it. 1 out of 10. No, that's not fair. At least a 3 out of 10. Kathy Bates and Fred Willard, bring it. It's just, it's one of the most insufferable Peggy episodes. It's way too long and there's not enough of a buffer of a good B story. Sure, the cop seducing Hank is a bit of a B story, but it never really delivers. It just feels awkward and weird. I don't know. A missed shot on all fronts in my book. Man, I don't even know what's going on anymore. I guess this is our Christmas episode? Hank goes to pick up Buck from the drunk tank and gets volunteered to build a Habitat for Humanity house in Buck's stead. Buck even buys him a Christmas tree! Yay! And this is all after Cotton mocked Hank at the mall. Buck announces that Hank is going to be promoted to manager, and in thanks, Hank tells Buck he loves him. Now, Cotton was there when he said this to his boss and then lost his promotion in about 5 minutes flat. Why was Cotton there? Oh, because Peggy was trying to mend Hank and Cotton's relationship. You know, the same Peggy that considered him a bitter old man and hated how he treated Hank in the past. Like, what? The rest of the episode is just dealing with that horrible idea. Cotton gets jealous that Hank likes Buck so much and wants his son to say he loves him. I mean, I guess I can see that, but also anytime Hank says or does anything, he just gets berated and torn down. So Hank eventually snaps and tells his dad he hates him. And he's so happy when he tells him, too. Every time he says it, he gets happier and happier, like a weight has been taken off of his shoulders. He's finally able to get all the anger out he's had for all these years. Sure, he stood up against his dad in 9 Pretty Darn Angry Men, but now he's full on told him, I hate you. He has had true closure. And when he tells Bobby his son never needs to love or even like his father, Bobby gets shook. It feels like a callback to the pilot in a lot of ways, where Bobby was afraid Hank didn't love him. He needs a guiding light in his time of need, and who better to help than President Peanut himself, Jimmy Carter, played by David Herman. I'll say this about David Herman's Jimmy Carter. It's really good until like the last 2 lines when he cracks a little bit. I hope it haunts him forever that an internet micro-celebrity has a critique of 2 lines he recorded 20 years ago. Take that, David. Know that I am disappointed. Jimmy frustratingly argues with Cotton until the episode just kinda ends. I don't know. I really wish Hank got to be manager, but I mean, like, yeah, it was weird he said that, but he said it in a time of just being absolutely elated. I'm focusing on that because I want to. The rest of the episode is dependent on Peggy having the dumbest idea imaginable and Cotton actually caring about Hank when not last season he was ready for him to be his fall guy. I don't know. It's an awkward episode that just never seems to find its footing, but does still have solid jokes and creative writing. It's a heaven sent 7 out of 10. Con offers Bobby 300 smackaroos if he dumps Connie. He refuses and actually stands up to Con, professing how much he cares about Connie. When Connie hears about it, though, they decide to use it to their advantage. They fake a breakup and then use the money to get a motel room where they can hold hands in peace. They get caught and Connie starts letting her grade slip and even passes a note to Bobby and gets it confiscated, where they think Connie will hurt herself if she's not with Bobby when she was just bored out of her mind learning about how to clean your ears. And this is where Con and Min show their true colors. If it's between letting their daughter date Bobby and her not being around anymore, they're going to welcome that walking marshmallow with open arms. They schedule hangout time, take the 2 to dinner, and try and take care of them as much as possible because Con would do anything for Connie. He loves her more than anything, as does Min. And even when Connie comes clean to Min, she isn't mad. She genuinely listens and offers her advice. It's kind of funny that the general, Min's father, doesn't really change at all in his appearance, but they keep changing Peggy's mom every other episode. However, with all this new available time, Bobby and Connie realize they just don't have anything in common. The episode ends with them both deciding to break up. It's Bobby's first true breakup. Sure, he had the older girl and they call it Bobby Love, but this is him breaking up for real with Connie. Sure, he seems okay now, but I guess in a way this is our first 2-parter of the season. Father the Bribe is surprisingly an excellent highlight on Con and Min. Not only do we get the backstory on how they met, we see they are the living definition of a power couple that just genuinely loves each other. I don't know, it's nice to see a character like Khan have such an unquestioning soft spot for his daughter. He just wants her happy and to have a better life than he did. Connie even says she doesn't overachieve just for her dad. I'm not saying they're perfect, no one is, but this episode did a great job of adding an extra layer to the Sousa-Newfoundphones, a last name I avoid saying if I can because I'm almost going to definitely butcher it. And that's not even mentioning the glorious B story of Dale setting up a low-frequency pirate radio for him to broadcast throughout the neighborhood all of his wacky conspiracies and how people just sit around listening to him. Like Khan has it in his car, drives off past the neighborhood, and it cuts off. That it's such a small but important intentional detail that it's crazy, and it adds so much charm to the episode. Father of the Bribe is a sly 9 out of 10 that does not prepare you for what you're about to see. It's Valentine's Day, and Bobby and Joseph are afraid they aren't going to get a flower. But sure enough, Bobby gets a flower and even gets another one from Connie. Charisse is also back, played by Eliza Schneider, and Bobby is just a legendary wingman and ladies' man, even getting Joseph a flower with one smooth move. Hank and Peggy are so proud of their little boy that they decide to let him babysit himself for the night. They then ask Bill to check in on Bobby to make sure he's okay. Leaving Bobby on his own? He earned that. Good for him. Hard working, and it's finally paying off. Telling Bill to check up on Bobby? Come on now, I thought Hank and Peggy loved their son. Why would they do that to him? Yeah, Bill rushes over to the house to have dinner with Bobby, and Bill takes him right on down to Depression Bay, Population 1. Bill is just a sad sack who wants to bring Bobby down with him, and he starts making Bobby second-guess everything, even starting to stress-eat his pain away. Like, imagine watching your dad's friend's wedding videos on Valentine's Day and just finding out that nothing works, you're just gonna end up sad, fat, and bald. Understandably, Bobby gets depressed. He gets horribly depressed. He begins to spiral just like Bill, and when he needs someone, Hank sends him along with Boomhauer. Boomhauer takes him to the mall and sits there trying to pick up chick after chick, and sure, he fails time and time again, but then he gets one. And that's a win of the day in his book. He teaches Bobby it's all about perspective. You can strike out 100 times, but eventually you'll hit a home run that'll blow everyone away. But the important thing is, you've got to keep putting yourself out there. You've got to keep trying. The through line between I'm with Cupid and Father of the Bribe is thin, absolutely, but these episodes needed to happen like this, otherwise neither would be as strong as they are together. We see Bobby in deep pain as he lets himself believe that nothing will matter, but Boomhauer, like a cleansing rain, washes all that away and shows that it's okay to keep going. He revitalizes Bobby when he needs it most, and that kind of resurgence will actually carry him through the rest of the season. I'm with Cupid is a love-struck 7 out of 10. The world is gearing up for the 2002 Winter Olympics in balmy Salt Lake City, Utah, and Arlen needs a hero to run the torch as it makes its way across America. Hank reveals he built Bobby an award shelf that now has plants on it compared to Hank's massive collection of trophies. Bobby starts to get a little self-conscious. Peggy decides to repurpose one of Hank's old awards for Bobby, and it's a literal participation trophy. Hank then tells Bobby that you need to do something worth earning an award like that. Bobby is then determined to be the torch carrier for Arlen. Sure enough, Nancy comes up to Hill House to congratulate the winner, and oddly enough, it's not Bobby, it's Hank. It's an interesting contrast. Hank thinks he isn't deserving of the torch even though he's won awards, and Bobby thinks he is deserving of the torch without having any. But in a touching movement, the gang actually wrote in and nominated Hank for being the hero of Arlen, and while Peggy is upset, I kinda don't get why. Of all the people that deserve it in Arlen, it would especially be Hank. When there's propane emergencies, there he is to heat people's homes. When people need a trusted confidant, they turn to Hank. He has earned this in every way imaginable. You'd think Peggy would be even somewhat happy for her husband, especially after finding out he didn't even nominate himself. Hank feels like he doesn't deserve the torch, and he's embarrassed by his showboating that he did before he got injured and took it as a divine message to never be happy. I'm not gonna lie, this is another fantastic episode. Bobby sits there and just genuinely has a heart-to-heart with his dad and tells him it's okay to feel good and not be afraid of some divine punishment just for the sin of being happy. It's great to see Hank actually start to train with a smile on his face, to have hope again. Hank gets the torch passed to him and Dale lights his smokes off of it. Bobby is a great coach who motivates his dad to keep going, and Hank is ecstatic and starts skipping his way through. And then he hits a puddle and extinguishes the torch. Not saying divine moment, just watch where you're running. He decides to run with a fake flame, and as he gets to McManorberry, he knows that his flame is a lie and extinguishes it right in front of the runner. However, Dale comes in clutch with the world's longest burning cigarettes and reignites the torch, giving Bobby a chance to run with the Olympic flame and even pass the illustrious torch, as it were. This is a genuinely funny and heartfelt episode. This is a truly magical episode of King of the Hill. Outstanding performances, dynamite character work, and an introspection into Hank we just don't really get the time to appreciate. This is a beautiful episode that shows we have the strongest season yet, and there's just so much to love and take in. Torch Song Hillegy is a celebration of everything Hank has done for Arlen, and it's a wonderful message that shows why everyone flocks around him. It's a beautiful 10 out of 10 episode that never gets old. Hank gets a new potential deal at the Renaissance Fair, led by King Philip, played by the legend Alan Rickman, aka Professor Snape. Obviously, you know Alan Rickman. You have seen him in something. He was one of the most iconic British actors of the modern age. Like, the man was a legend. I gotta say, in this episode, he crushes it. He owns it. I've talked about special guest stars, but I mean, Alan Rickman is just next level. The best guests are when there's someone completely different. Renee Zellweger, Kathleen Turner, Robert Stack, and now here Alan Rickman is personifying the perfect Renaissance Fair owner with his propane-powered dragon that just blows Hank away. I love it. King Philip is one of the most iconic characters in the entire show. And it's not like it's a bad episode at all. Laura Dern is also in this episode. Now, is she bringing the groundbreaking performance she does in F is for Family? No, of course not. But it's still frickin' good with a great fake accent. It's just not Alan Rickman going full ham with it good. Hank makes the deal and agrees to take the family to the Ren Fair, and he was just so god-dang enchanted by that propane beast. At the fair, Peggy decides to point out the historical inaccuracies to Philip, and he offers Hank for Peggy to come work for him. He then runs her through the ringer, and they show that they only offer wench roles for women, and she ends up smacking a rug. Peggy speaks about the future and gets accused of being a witch. Peggy then tries to work with the other girls and finds out they don't have basic working rights and challenges the king, who tries to hide it behind it being the 1500s at the Ren Fair. Hank also seems to get kind of swept up in it and tells Peggy to not do anything. I don't know. On the one hand, if she was just this reasonable Peggy all the time, yeah, that wouldn't be cool and Hank would be an ass for telling her that. But literally earlier in the season, she thought she was in the right and she trafficked a kid. I don't know. He isn't entirely in the wrong for wanting her to not make things worse and ruffle feathers. But she gets put in the stockade after throwing tomatoes at Philip, who challenges Hank to a jousting match. Hank loses the joust, and when he's at his lowest, Peggy rides in and strikes Philip down, and he quickly loses his accent when he finds out he's getting sued. Now, that being said, Alan Rickman just can't do a good Texas accent. Even the Groupster had a flaw or two. Joust Like a Woman is a dumb episode that works because of it being an unapologetic excuse to take the family to the Ren Fair. It is setting up the setting more than anything else and just letting the family have fun with it. Joust Like a Woman is a chivalrous 9 out of 10 that showcases what happens when the show is firing on all pistons to deliver peak quality. Like, you may not have even noticed the third story, where Bobby is looking for costumes, and what costume does he pick? The court jester. Not the knight, not the wizard, the jester, which will be played on much later on. Connie is playing her violin and driving the gang understandably crazy, so Hank decides to bust out his guitar and play in the alley. Connie hears Hank's guitar and gets fascinated by bluegrass music and starts playing along. It's a genuinely really sweet moment, and yeah, Hank wants to nurture her bluegrass talent while Con wants Connie to focus on classical studies. The gang and Connie rock out with some Blue Moon of Kentucky. Bobby starts to feel out of place, and the gang wants to take Connie to the beautiful musical city of Branson, Missouri to compete while they back her up. Hank even stands up for Connie in front of Con, and Connie decides to skip camp so she and the gang can compete. And so they go to beautiful Branson, and the stars are aplenty. Charlie Daniels is back, and Yakov Smirnov makes an appearance. Yeah, what a wild talent, that Yakov. And Boomhauer's singing voice would actually be returning great, Vince Gill. Hank is just really passive about Bobby this episode, and I don't know, he just wants to be a part of the group. It's not like Bobby's trying to steal the show or anything. Like, even when he's just working on jokes in the van, Hank is just unnecessarily harsh because he just has to have his precious order. Hank starts to take the fun out of bluegrass that Connie appreciated, even willing to skip a Yakov Smirnov show to practice. Fun fact, Yakov has been performing in Branson for 30 years, and is still performing to this day. Con finds out that Connie is in Branson and decides to go and get her back. Connie blows up at Hank because she doesn't want to be a professional bluegrass musician, she just wanted to have fun. Bobby and Connie actually have a nice moment where they talk about running away to the Appalachian Mountains. The gang trick Charlie Daniels and get him to play in Connie's stead. Connie decides to play by the street to earn money for their bus ticket to the Appalachia, and Con and Hank actually have a genuine heart-to-heart and learn to appreciate their kids in a new light, Hank even appreciating Bobby's joke writing. The episode ends with the Blue Moon of Kentucky yet again. This is another just perfect episode. Sure, you can argue that there are lulls and spots, but those are nitpicks at best. This is a 10 out of 10 episode that when looked at in a vacuum is a perfect encapsulation of what the show is about. You get all the character motivations, a solid resolution that actually matters, and a perfectly compact 23 minutes. Like, Connie doesn't go back and win the Big Fiddle contest. It was never about that for her. They play by the side of the road and her dad sings along. That's all she needed. That is a proper conclusion for Connie. And it just shows that this season really is just banger after banger. Look, I hate a lot of Peggy episodes, but this one might just be my favorite, if not my favorite episode of all time, and I doubt I'm alone in feeling that way. When Peggy can't explain a test question, she worries about her intellect, while Hank looks towards retirement and getting the best RV to tour the country. Peggy takes a genius test and gets invited to a special dinner for geniuses like herself. And there she runs into the man behind the whole scheme, Dr. Vizosa, played by the Fly himself, Jeff Goldblum. That's 2 Jurassic Park actors this season. Coincidence? I think not. Lupe Ontiveros would also play Anne in the episode. Remember Bobby's boss at the racetrack a few seasons ago? Guess what? Jimmy's a genius too! Just like Peggy! And Luann! And yeah, it's a scam. Hank keeps trying to help Peggy figure out that it's a scam and wants to help, but of course, Peggy refuses. I've seen a lot of Jeff Goldblum roles. The Big Chill is one of my mom's favorite movies, and I gotta say, Dr. Vizosa is one of his most inspired characters of all time. He is the most realized, fully fleshed out, just next level character in his repertoire. The whole episode is effectively a heist movie, and the key to a truly great heist movie is someone worth robbing. So, after Dr. Vizosa scams Peggy out of a grant for a fake doctorate, she decides to take the other geniuses and get even by setting up a fake casino. I don't even want to get in the nitty-gritty of the scheme or anything, because it's just an episode that needs to be enjoyed and witnessed. It's the perfect way to handle this newer Peggy. This episode is perfect. Again, one of the best of the show, cementing the season as one of the overall greatest. Again, it shows that Kathy Najimy will play Peggy however she needs to, and will bring it 1,000% of the time. Through all of this, Hank was in the right, and he really should have just handled it. And she even planned for him to interfere. But also, she wouldn't have been in this problem in the first place if she didn't think so just dangerously high of herself. Again, remember, same season she did a wacky little kidnapping. I don't know, just feels like we should linger on that for a minute. The Substitute Spanish Teacher is a perfect evergreen episode. You can watch it whenever, wherever, whether it's your first time or your 30th, and still have a good time. I remember days I was homesick from school and I watched this episode, or when I was eating dinner with my family, or waking up at 6 in the morning to have it blasted on Adult Swim before school. And even after growing up with this episode, it's still one of my favorites of all time, and probably the episode I revisit the most. The Substitute Spanish Teacher is a cunning and out of this world 10 out of 10. The VFW has come on hard times, and Cotton and the rest of the World War II vets have to sell their most prized medals and trophies. Which, we'll get into the bulk of the episode. That's a tragic thing that's going on. But this one has easily one of my favorite B stories of the entire show. Dale buys a falconer's glove and decides to get a falcon. And then, every time he gives the Falcon a command, it just violently attacks Bill, who is just shrieking in fear. But because Stephen Root brings it to the next degree, it's frickin' hysterical. Dale accuses Bill of looking like a vole. It's incredible. Hank sees how bad it is when he has to collect their propane and decides to help the vets out by getting the Vietnam vets to join in. We'd get Dave Allen of Ned's Declassified and Naked Trucker and T-Bone fame opposite David Koechner as Jesse, and John C. McKinley, aka Dr. Cox in Scrubs, as Ronnie. Ed Asner and Jack Carter would both return as well. Basically, the World War II vets don't play nice, and Cotton refuses to respect Hank since he could never enlist in the military, what with his narrow urethra. However, when the vets set off the non-vets into a frenzy, Hank and Cotton have to work together to survive. Hank even has an ingenious idea to follow the moss because it always grows on the north side of the tree. Hey gang, so, fun fact, moss grows on any side of a tree. Please don't use it as your guiding light. Cotton admits that Hank is capable of being a competent military leader, and he admits defeat and takes in the Vietnam vets. Unfortunate Son is tricky because it's an easy episode to explain, but a little bit harder to get into why it works. Where I detest the resolution of the Father, the Son, and the JC, I think Unfortunate Son has the better reconciliation where Cotton sees in real time that Hank is and has always been strong enough, good enough, and that the younger generation is okay. They were mocking the Vietnam vets, but as they actually took the time to listen to them, they understood they saw the horrors of war as well, no matter what the public opinion of the war was. King of the Hill does a surprisingly, almost surgically effective job of not only humanizing, but respecting our troops and veterans. I don't know, a lesser show wouldn't have taken the time to have that last resolution at the end of the episode. They would have just focused on Hank and Cotton making up, and that's really just only part of it. Yeah, Cotton screwed everything up, and he even admits it, but man, it's gotta have solid writing to really stand out, and Unfortunate Son checks all the boxes it needs to check to make it just that much better. It's a 10 out of 10 episode that kind of cements Season 6 at this point as one of the strongest of the entire series, and I really hope the next episode doesn't do anything to shake that foundation whatsoever. Gee, that sure would be horrible. It would be even worse if it was a Peggy episode. Man, thank God the last episode cemented this as a good season. Get it? Thank God. On a roll here, gang. Keep up. Peggy has decided that the world deserves full-time teacher Peggy Hill, so she goes out into the market just for a statewide hiring freeze to happen. Hank offers for Peggy to work at Strickland Propane, and she does for a time until she hears about a job over at the Catholic school, and bingo bango bongo, now she's pretending to be a nun to teach Spanish. Same season, she yanked a kid across country borders. Just saying, maybe reconsider. Like, she's watching Monsignor Martinez to learn Catholicism. Credit where credit is due, she doesn't weaponize the ruler when it's handed to her. Low bar, but an important one we've already discussed earlier on in the show. Now, all this being said, I should mention that Kathy Najimy does know something about playing a nun, because fun fact, she was also in the Sister Act movies alongside Whoopi Goldberg and Maggie Smith. And they do reference the movie, so I'd be failing you if I didn't also mention it. Yeah, no, Peggy just starts shotgunning Catholicism opinions, and the kids are just eating it up. What could possibly go wrong? There's also this undercurrent of Donna just robbing Strickland blind, and it's just terrific everything she got away with. It's all petty infractions that built up so fast. Anyway, Hank makes a surprise visit and finds out Peggy has been pretending to be a nun, and is understandably upset with it. Also, Peggy debates with Sister Mary Catherine, played just brilliantly by Cynthia Stevenson, who reminds her of the potential of eternal damnation. She then has nightmares of a propane-fueled hell and realizes the error in her ways. She comes clean and gets understandably fired, and then gets fired from Strickland, but gets to keep her mug. Peggy pretends to be a nun, Peggy gets caught, end of episode. There's nothing to grab onto, and the episode just kind of flounders around trying to convince you that Peggy isn't totally in the wrong, but it doesn't do anything more with it. It doesn't add to it. There's no B stories or enough cutaways to make it next level. Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret Hill is 5 commandments out of 10. It's not worth it. The Army is having war games, and Bill is starting to struggle with his wrists. Dale bashes Bill for being worthless, and Hank tries to back him up. I'm just gonna get into the A story real fast. Dale convinces Bill that when he got into the military, they experimented on him to develop a kind of walrus super soldier. Bill begins to spiral and thinks the Army stole his life and body from him, so he decides to drunkenly steal a tank and drive it around, while Hank and the gang have to help him get it back onto the war games field while they sing Free Bird and it plays in the back. Bill finds out he was actually just given a placebo, and Dale is just a moron. All things considered, this is a perfect A story and a brilliant Bill episode. It hits all the notes it needs to hit and gives you all the emotional points to show you the gang truly does love Bill at the end of the day. They're willing to drive a tank with him into an area with live ammunition. They care. If the episode was just the A story, I think it would have been a 10 out of 10. And then the B story happens. Peggy Hill gets challenged to guess the weight of her frozen yogurt, and if she guesses correctly, she gets a free one. She fails, and this causes her to spiral into perfectly calculating the individual weights of her toppings to eventually get her free frozen yogurt. This is the perfect Peggy palate cleanser after the last episode, and cranks this episode to an absolute Spinal Tap 11 out of 10. The wild thing is, there's no special guest stars or anything. They just had this story and thought it would stand on its own merits, and then it proceeded to do just that. Make no mistake, this is one of the best episodes of the series and just a terrific part of any marathon. Again, I don't know what it is about this season, but it feels like there's a steady groove of noticeably improved quality. Also, 0 puppets compared to the last season, so a marked improvement no matter what. Tanking it to the streets is the kind of Bill episode I wish we got more of. He gets whipped into a frenzy, gets drunk, but when he needs his friends, there they are ready to jump in and save the day. It's an episode that gives you hope, and sometimes that's just all you need. Joseph just absolutely concusses Bill with a lacrosse ball while trying to practice. Bobby is in a performance of Mice and Men, so they're both doing things. Bobby wants to practice with his dad, and Hank just pushes it onto Peggy, who swiftly Uno reverse cards. Dale eats a ball and takes Bill out again through a sliding door. Joseph and Hank actually begin to practice lacrosse together, and Hank gets enthralled by the game. And Dale and Hank decide to switch, and so Dale goes to help Bobby act because he and the gun club go to theater every week. And sure enough, at Bobby's play, Dale and Peggy show up, but Hank's a no-show, deciding to watch Joseph play instead with Nancy. They bump into each other, and Hank and Dale start to beat themselves up. And while they commiserate, Dale comes clean. He knows deep down Joseph isn't his son. No, of course, Joseph's father is only one thing: an alien, because Dale was getting too close to, the truth or something. I don't care. Dale is so convinced of it, he just tells Hank he's a bad dad. Hank agrees to be in of Mice and Men for Bobby after the boy shows he can cry on command. Dale tells Joseph he's an alien, and yeah, that's the episode. Joseph spirals thinking he's an alien after Nancy does not reassure him at all, and Dale has to go get Joseph back after he runs away with Bobby to Martha. Hank convinces Dale that he's Joseph's real dad because he raised Joseph, and it's more important to have raised the boy than to have fathered him, and they find the boys with 2 glowing lights in the sky. Dale and Joseph rationalize that they are flesh and blood related, and Hank and Bobby bond over their bodyguarding of the Gribbles, which is actually really sweet in a way. I don't know. Of Mice and Little Green Men is still very much tiptoeing around the fact that Dale isn't Joseph's biological father. We've had 5 episodes about it already. Just go all the way with it or don't bother at this point. I will say Joseph does at least seem much more tolerable in this episode, but the Hank and Bobby stuff gets the weakest resolution of the bunch, which is just a darn shame. It's a very terrestrial 6 out of 10. In In one of the most wholesome opening scenes of the entire show, Hank and the gang decide to build a putting green in their backyard after the golf courses all fill up with reservations. Khan naturally mocks them for having fun and talks about the dream of watching golf at Nine Rivers Country Club. Hank, mad with power, then decides to turn the entire neighborhood into a golf course. Khan invites Ted and Cindy over to try and get into Nine Rivers, and when Ted parks on the street while Hank and the gang golf, wow, nothing bad could possibly happen. They then proceed to subvert expectations and smash Khan's pitcher with a golf ball, and when they go to confront them, Ted ends up actually inviting Hank to Nine Rivers as their token white guy. Of course, not telling him that and just wanting to be friendly. And yeah, Hank gets to live Khan's dream just because Ted, quote, he's super white. Khan sneaks onto the course as Hank's +1. We then get the introduction of Mr. Ho, played by Peter Kwong. Ted tells Khan to get Hank to join Nine Rivers so the PGA doesn't rescind their license, and Khan can join as well. I gotta say, I love how Toby Huss plays Ted. He's just so schemy in the best way. You can feel how fake he is, and it's just so delightfully mechanical. And when Hank wins a round of golf with Tiger Woods and sees his name was jammed into the raffle so it was rigged, he understandably gets upset. And to his credit, the entire time he is asking why he's getting preferential treatment and why Khan isn't being treated like him. He understands that there is a serious discrepancy. Then, when Ted can't tell Hank what kind of accessories he sells, he just walks off so that he can rejoin his friends and join in their little backyard games. Like, it could have ended there and been fine, just an 8 out of 10. Then Khan gets dropped from Nine Rivers and thanks Hank for taking away the one place he belongs. So Hank makes him an honorary member of the Rainy Street Country Club and gives Khan a sense of community right in his own neighborhood. This is easily one of the best Hank and Khan episodes. It goes that extra mile to give a satisfying conclusion that actually feels complete. Because, for once, Khan is not the active antagonist. You could argue it's Ted. Khan is just jealous of Hank getting to live his dream. Khan is trying to get Ted to let him in Nine Rivers. It's never expressly about Hank. It could have been any white guy. Hank is just the one that they knew that they could probably control. Man Without a Country Club is just another 10 out of 10 episode that shines because it's just good core King of the Hill. Hill comes up dry on Alamo beer, and everyone is shocked when Alamo has been pulled off all the shelves in Texas. Peggy calls to find out what happened and decides to take a swing at it in Espanol and gets a temp job at the call center. There, she's taught by Teresa, played by Megan Mullally, comedy legend, and Hank and the gang start to spiral when they have to decide on a new lager and contemplate going down to Mexico to get some good old classic Alamo beer. Peggy finds out that batches of Alamo have been tainted and that they're still selling it in Mexico after pulling it off of US shelves. However, she can't tell Hank what's going on, and he keeps trying to push it so that Peggy will eventually spill her secrets. It's just people keeping secrets and suffering the consequences. And yet, this is still one of the best episodes of the season. This is one of Peggy's strongest episodes, at least as a character, and it makes Lupe's revenge feel like a distant memory. Like she does corporate espionage and starts peeling away the layers of crime one beer at a time. The episode is suspenseful and yet manages to interweave comedic bits and has the perfect balance of jokes and story that makes it a downright classic. Hank even goes to confront Alamo and the president directly and gets thrown out, while Peggy brings the company down from the inside. It's much in the same vein as The Substitute Spanish Prisoner, and shows that they know how to write Peggy when they want to give her an absolute knockout episode. Like, Peggy uses her powers for foundational change to help people that are being poisoned and manipulated without them being aware of it. She can't keep a secret if it's endangering lives, and yeah, no, that's great. That's a wonderful motivation for a character to have. More of this. Less of her thinking she can speak fluent Spanish. That's what you want to see. More of this, less of Lupe. Fear and Loathing is an accidentally soap-filled 9 out of 10 that is another phenomenal example of classic comedy writing structure of the late 90s and early 2000s. It's 23 minutes of just good, classic hillage. Buck tasks Hank with putting down his emus when he's supposed to have a date night with Peggy. Luann comes over for game night, and when Peggy is too busy, she decides to join a sorority. Anna Faris guest stars, and yeah, it's a Luann episode. Something that's become rarer and rarer, and I'm pretty sure it's her only one of the entire season. Not to say Brittany Murphy hasn't been playing other characters throughout the season, but yeah, this is one of the only times we see Luann as the main focus. Luann then unknowingly joins a cult. And that's the episode. Hank and the gang bond with the emus they're supposed to put down, and Luann joins a cult. Classic normal King of the Hill fare. I will say, on the one hand, I'm disappointed the episode depends on Luann just being oblivious and dumber than a bag of rocks. But also, Brittany Murphy plays dumb Luann really, really well. Plus, they animate the emu like they're raptors right out of Jurassic Park, third reference in the season, and just adds an extra element of terror into the mix. Hank runs into Luann selling jam on the roadside and gets taken home, where Peggy swears it's just hazing. So naturally, Peggy gets swept up in the cult herself because she didn't have friends when she was her age. It makes me wonder if Hot Scoop was inspired at all by this episode, since there's more than a few parallels. And while the gang is trying to get enough meat that they can pass off as emu, Dale tells Hank that Omega House is a cult and they need to get them back. And so Hank starts grilling steaks to assault the house with the scent of cleanly seared, hearty beef flavors. They save the girls by hand-feeding them steak. It's an episode. I don't know what you want from me. There's not even a real conclusion for Luann. It's much like when Boomhauer got locked in the mental ward. There was no extra bit to it, it just had a conclusion. I'll also say I love the end of the episode where the emu attack Buck and let Stephen Root just screech again like an absolute pro. Fun with Jane and Jane is one of the weirdest episodes of the show, and I'm kind of about it. Sure, it does nothing for Luann, but it makes sense Peggy would get lost in a cult. Not to mention the emu side story is so surreal and yet so entertaining in the best way. Just having it open with Buck just tossing Hank a gun is great. That's how you know the entire episode is just gonna be wild. The episode is an 8 out of 10 that doesn't break the mold, but it's just a solid little weird adventure. It's Dale and Nancy's 20th anniversary, and 1 year since she's been exclusive to Dale. Aw, that's nice. Nancy invites Dale's dad, which sends Dale into a fury because Dale's dad kissed Nancy on their wedding day. Don't think anything of it. Dale thinks he's a big rodeo star that abandoned his family to be the womanizer he detests. So Nancy asks Hank to go and invite the womanizing ladies' man at the local rodeo he's at. The rodeo is in fact a gay rodeo. Dale's dad isn't a womanizing monster, Dale's dad is gay. I'll say this, everyone handles that Bug is gay incredibly well. Bug was getting ready to make out with a caterer when he panicked and kissed Nancy by accident when he heard Dale coming and didn't want to come out to him. Bug's boyfriend finds out about him being previously married and having a son, and they get understandably upset. Bug then goes to Dale's to apologize, and they legitimately make up as they have a tearful reunion. But of course, Dale still doesn't know his dad is gay, and he even ropes Juan Pedro into hanging out, just blissfully unaware of their relationship. Bug even tells Nancy he needs to come out of the closet with Dale. Like, the whole conflict of the second part of the episode is Dale thinks his dad is a government agent and he yells at him. That's it. When he finds out that Bug is actually gay and not a government agent, he doesn't care. He's just so elated he doesn't work for the government. I don't know. The episode is great, and it's wonderful to see Dale rebuild a relationship with his dad. Granted, this isn't his dad we were shown earlier in the series, but I honestly prefer this pivot since they keep him like this for the duration of the series. My Own Private Rodeo is surprisingly restrained for LGBTQ representation in the 2000s, much in line with Gun Club Earl earlier in the season. They're just trying to live their lives and be who they want to be. No one attacks them for it. It's literally just misunderstandings that get in the way. My Own Private Rodeo is a solid 8 out of 10. If it was anyone else, the misunderstandings wouldn't be half as believable, but because you have zero faith in Dale understanding literally anything, it does actually make total sense. This is the same season he thought his friend was a walrus and his son was an alien. Dale, be not proud. Huh. That could be an episode title. Hank is selling a customer an Imperial when Nancy comes in with a propane emergency that she wants to set up a new hot tub for her anniversary. Sure enough, he gets that jacuzzi humming and rushes off so Dale and Nancy can celebrate. Hank goes to sleep that night, satisfied while Peggy is pent up. Hank then dreams of searing burgers on the grill in the nude with Nancy. This is an episode. Hank then tells the family he was grilling burgers in the nude, and Peggy counters with how she took out Principal Moss in her own dream. Hank goes to see John Redcorn and sets him off when he tells him about the dream. John then spills Hank's dream to Dale, who tells Hank, Peggy, and Nancy, and Peggy feels betrayed that she wasn't in the dream and instead it was Nancy. The dream becomes a recurring nightmare for the poor man. I mean, he's starting to lose sleep and keep seeing Nancy in his dreams. It's understandable that he'd be concerned about it. Peggy just thinks he's bored of her, and so she tries to reignite their love life by recreating the dream, even going up to a nudist beach so they can do it uninterrupted. She then figures out that Hank wasn't attracted to Nancy, he was attracted to the use of propane. He didn't see the potential in propane and saw it as this noble gas, but now he's learning to love it all over again and figures out all the weird things you can do with it. It's the episode where you find out that Hank really, really loves propane. That's it. That's all the episode boils down to. It's not really all that funny. It isn't all that bad. It's just kind of there. I mean, even at the end, it just feels like Peggy's being annoying for the sake of being annoying. And once Hank realizes what's going on, there's just a swift resolution that doesn't do anything. Suge Knight is a 5 out of 10 that just kind of drags its way limping across the finish line and never really delivers on a good seared adventure. Bill is alone in the alley when he sees a runner and naturally begins to spiral like only he can. Boomhauer is still seeing the ice cream girl he's been shown with from time to time. That's right, it's a Boomhauer episode! Yeah, no, Bill is stalking this girl. Like, it's kinda creepy. He's got cameras and everything. Dale offers to help Bill dig up the alley so that the runner will twist her ankle and be forced to talk with him. They are willing to destroy the road so that she can get injured and he can come and save the day. Boomhauer runs from his ice cream girlfriend to try and make her go away. And after their whole trap works way too well, Boomhauer, instead of Bill, carries the runner to his place to take care of her. Even gets her a taxi that he covers after the fact. Like, Bill gets upset at Boomhauer for stealing the jogger from him, and it's very apparent he never stood a single chance. Like, the man is delusional in this episode, and it hurts until the end. Boomhauer actually starts to fall for the jogger and wants to spend actual time with her. Marlene, the jogger, is played by Laura Linney. Boomhauer is in bliss and invites the gang over to her house where he and Bill get into it again. And when Marlene comes back and finds him there, she's understandably upset. Turns out that Boomhauer just got Boomhauered. He starts to obsess over a woman that used him for a quick fling, and he is absolutely devastated when she doesn't want to marry him. As he begins to spiral into an all-too-familiar pit of depression, Bill comes to his aid and pulls his friend out of the darkness. Because you have to keep going, and if you get hurt, you just force yourself to heal and keep moving. There is still a chance if you keep moving forward. Some great advice he gave back in I'm with Cupid. We see Boomhauer drag down into the pit that Bill calls the normal every day. But then Bill is the one that pulls him out of it before going to a women's prison to pick up chicks. Like Boomhauer uses and tosses out women, Bill will destroy a road to get a woman to sprain her ankle in front of him. Neither character is particularly in the right in the beginning of the episode, but by the end you at least feel that Boomhauer learns quite a few lessons. It's just this wild shotgun of Boomhauer content to make up for lost ground, I guess. Dang Ol' Love is an odd 7 out of 10 that never quite gets its footing, but it's some memorable and inspiring moments to perk you up before we head into our next two-parter, and it is a doozy. Peggy invents family vlogging by trying to get her family an all-inclusive trip to Hawaii by pitching a journalism article. Cotton is watching a celebration of World War II vets on TV and storms off, even refusing to tell people about how he killed 50 men, his favorite story. Dee Dee begs Hank to help Cotton since he seems like he's just so depressed lately, and so Hank takes him to John Redcorn's new healing lounge. Dale compliments Bill. It's nice. At the sweat lodge, they start to trip from the exhaustion, and Hank gets the conversation he knows he'd never get with Cotton. Basically, Cotton is also haunted by the ghosts of the men he removed from their earthly tethers. Bobby even goes to check on Cotton afterwards, where Cotton confides in him. Cotton wants to go to Japan and apologize, and Bobby tries to get Peggy to write about it for a trip, and she just doesn't see a story there. You know, great journalistic instinct there, Peggle. Sure enough, when she's desperate, the bystander agrees to send Peggy and her family to Japan, and yeah, the Hills are going to the land of Nihon. They pack forks, pork pies, and their sense of adventure. Hank removes Bobby from the emergency seats because he knows he just could not handle the responsibility. Dale and Bill break into Hank's house. Once they get into Tokyo, Cotton gets approached by a TV film crew, and James C. is actually in the episode, who funnily enough played Jackie Chan in the Jackie Chan Adventures. Obviously the animated parts, the live action parts were played by Jackie Chan. The Hills get to their hotel and sleep in the entryway because they don't know that the rest of the room is available. Like, this is a 2-part season finale with 3 stories to it, which is just wild. Luann gets another dog to try and pretend to be Ladybird when she thinks Ladybird died. Bill and Dale pretend to be Hank and Peggy to deter invaders by living in their house, and Cotton has to find his old love. It's a lot to take in at once. Hank helps Cotton, but then a valet drops off flowers and cologne, and Cotton had even tried to dye his hair with shoe polish, or what we call in the States, a Rudy. Turns out Cotton is trying to find an old love to reconnect and wanted to show Michiko, Hank, and Bobby. And as the family joins Cotton at Michiko's apartment, they knock on the door and boom! Hank's got a half-brother. End of part 1. Again, much like the other 2-parters, it doesn't feel right going in depth right after part 1, but it's wild where all the stories are left off. The episode is a lot, but probably one of the best for Cotton yet. Now on to part 2! I feel like I just need to get this out of the way. Michiko is voiced by again returning great Amy Hill. Junichiro, Hank's half-brother, surely has to be played by some wild guest star, right? Ken Watanabe, beat Takeshi of Takeshi's Castle. Oh, what about Naoki Tatsuda? Get the Japanese voice actor for Hank to play his Japanese brother. Wouldn't that be neat? Junichiro is actually played by David Carradine, aka Bill from Kill Bill, and avid hose enthusiast. It's a casting choice. Michiko isn't there, so they invite Junichiro to dinner. Cotton was healing up in a U.S. hospital in post-war Japan, and he fell in love with a nurse and then got shipped back to the States even as he tried to stay and be with her. Cotton actually loved Michiko and wanted to stay with her. It's wild to see how he actually felt something for someone else. He had a human connection. Hank is ecstatic that he has a brother, and Junichiro is much, much less excited. Bobby goes out to explore the nightlife and finds Definitely Not Dance Dance Revolution and begins dancing in front of everyone and even finds a girl to dance with. A simpler time before the arcade started to fall out of fashion, sadly. Cotton and Michiko reconnect, and Cotton gets invited to meet the Japanese emperor. Cotton tries to apologize and earn the forgiveness of Michiko and Junichiro, but Junichiro refuses, sending Cotton into a shinless fury. Junichiro works in robots. He's even the assistant manager of the factory. Yeah, he's just Japanese Hank. They team up to look for Cotton while Bobby dances his way to love. The brothers share a well-vended beer and commiserate about the limits of their bodies. Hank gets fed up with Junichiro being a pushover, and so he helps him harness his inner Texan to be more effective. I'm just going to be that guy for a second here because I'd be fascinated to find out what Japanese fans of the series think of these episodes. They paint the Hills as ignorant of the culture but still trying to be respectful of it, and that's great. But when you get to David Carradine as Junichiro, sometimes he uses actual proper Japanese, but most of the time he just mumbles a bunch of kind of Japanese words. Which, if you know anything about David Carradine, especially David Carradine in the early 2000s, that's par for the course. Cotton takes off to spit in the Emperor's face. Bobby misses his 6:30 date. It's the all is lost moment. Hank and his brother then go to try and convince Cotton to not spit on the Emperor, and sure enough, he accepts the medal gracefully and actually tears up introducing his 2 sons, Hank and Junichiro. Cotton, in a moment of genuine wholesomeness, stops the cab to the airport so Bobby can dance and say goodbye before never seeing his dance girlfriend again. The episode ends on a DDR screen. And that's the season finale. The Hills go to Japan, Hank has a brother, Cotton gets a lot of redemption, and Bobby dances. Returning Japanese is probably the least impactful of the multi-part season finales. There's no lasting consequences, no season-long arcs afterwards, but it's still an incredibly well put together final adventure to wrap a season. I genuinely believe the smartest thing they could do was not focus on Peggy. She got them there, she gets to deliver her jokes, but she doesn't get an adventure to embarrass herself, and I think that's super smart. They don't overcomplicate things. Sure enough, Luann, Dale, and Bill get their stories resolved swiftly, and we really only have the 3 stories in Japan to wrap up alongside it. Which, I mean, huge kudos there. The 2-parter tried to do 5 stories, and somehow manages to wrap them all so succinctly. Returning Japanese is a solid 9 out of 10 that knows what it wants to do, and sticks to it. And there we have it, that's Season 6. Anything you think I was right on? Wrong on? What was your favorite episode? Least favorite? Let me know in the comments below. Season 6 was honestly probably one of the best seasons of the entire series. It has a ton of timeless episodes, some of the sharpest writing, and just gives you all the best you'd expect from King of the Hill. Is there a narrative through line or anything? Not really, but we did get 2 two-parters and just a ton of really solid King of the Hill outings. Season 6 wasn't trying to be more than it was and just wanted to entertain people, and honestly, I think it absolutely succeeded on most counts. When a season has maybe 1 or 2 less than stellar episodes out of a whole 22-episode run, oh yeah, you gotta be doing something right. But don't you worry, we still have 7 more seasons to review, and next season we're even getting more great one-offs. We're getting the only banned episode of King of the Hill, and Love for Bill. Aww. So, don't go to heaven before we talk about Season 7. And if you liked what you saw, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Tell your friends we're out here. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you've been enjoying this video series as much as I've enjoyed revisiting this timeless classic. Stay strong, know I believe in you, and keep fighting that good fight. You've got this.